What's up, guys? It's Doug here from the Abstract Recording Studios in Glendale, and on behalf of the Recording Connection, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick mastering video in Logic. Logic is definitely not the preferred software for mastering. The industry standard softwares vary between a bunch of different things, but a lot of people use a software called Wavelab. But in the scheme of doing your productions and wanting a quick master, obviously, when you finish a mix 9 times out of 10, you're going to be like, oh wow, this is not near as loud as the stuff that I hear on the radio. Or if you compare it to other records, it will sound loud. It will sound less loud and just not as compressed and professionally polished. So in the interest of doing your own productions, I definitely want to cover mastering in a very, very brief way, just to give you an idea of kind of what's involved and the potential to what it can do to your records. It's a very necessary part of the production process. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The track I'm going to be working on is a track that we actually finished here a little while back. The artist's name is Wagner. He's an EDM guy, and this track is actually featuring a really, really talented singer. His name is Crane. These guys are just up and comers getting out there, and they've been kind enough to let us use their record. So I went ahead and pulled this in. And if you'll see here, it's asking me if I want to import tempo information and things like that. I don't really need to do that. This was a file that we actually mixed in Logic, and so a lot of the things were saved into the file itself. I'm going to import the tempo, even though we're not going to use it, and the audio markers, which will just kind of help, to let us navigate things. I don't need to create any new tracks. I'm just going to be working with this stereo image. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, obviously, is just make things a little bit bigger. So now that I've got the track imported, you can see the WAV file is not typically what you would see with a mastered WAV file. It doesn't look like a brick, which is what a lot of the EDM music looks like today. We're going to do as little visually as we can. But I will say that visual, nowadays having something visual to look at does help you. I mean, it definitely doesn't hurt. So first thing I want to do is, if you haven't already done it, make sure that your inspector is viewable, and that you've got it up, because that's where we're going to put most of our plugins and things like that. So before I get to that, I want to cover a couple of different things. First of all, Logic makes mastering relatively simple. It's by no means a professional way of approaching the process, but it does have several presets that you can kind of go to and see and play with and see how they work, which we'll cover in just a second. Very quickly, a mastering chain consists of multiple things. Typically, your first point of contact is going to be some sort of gain plugin. Nowadays, people mix at a very, very high level, and a lot of times to even have action on getting headroom in your mix, you'll have to use a gain plugin. The next plugin we're going to use is a compressor, and the first compressor that you use is something fairly gentle. It's just kind of massaging the peaks. Immediately after that, you'll have some sort of EQ or some maybe multi-band compression or something like that, something that's going to give you frequency control. Then you'll add another compressor, and then a limiter is the very, very basics. There's several things that we may use. In addition to that, sometimes people use like a stereo spreader to control the stereo image, a phase scope, those types of things. And most mastering software will have a bunch of scopes for you to kind of look at, which obviously Logic doesn't give you. So we're just going to kind of fly by the seat of our pants. So the first thing to do, obviously, is listen to the record. So we'll go through a couple of the different sections just to get a sense of where the track is at and what the mix is like.
up late inside your home, singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls, or while we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste away my nights, and with you I can finally feel alive. Oh, 'cause you are the one I adore, and we could have been so much more. Oh, but I took my time to figure it all out now. And now you're loving me while I just dance in the background. Can you save me? Can you save me? Can you save me? We stayed up late inside your home, singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls, or while we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste away my nights, and with you I can finally feel alive. Oh, 'cause you are the one I adore, and we could have been so much more. Can you save me? Can you save me? Can you save me?
Okay, so now you get a general idea what the track's like. It's actually pretty well mixed. Just from listening to that, I know that my focuses are going to be kind of just making the upper frequencies a little bit brighter. And obviously, with most EDM tracks, you're going to want to focus a little bit on the bass and the kick and kind of bring those out a little bit in the mix. And then we're just going to worry about volume, kind of making the overall thing louder. So the first way I'm going to approach this, just to give you an idea of what Logic kind of has in store, is I'll use some of the presets so you can get an idea of what those do and what they look like. Anytime you're going to use Logic presets or combinations of plugins, you're going to actually do it on the channel strip setting. If you actually click on the channel strip setting here on the master fader, you'll see that there's a ton of mastering presets. They're in the legacy section. And then there's also some newer ones that were added with the latest revision. So, we'll just go ahead and, since this is a very, very, main roomy kind of top 40 EDM track, let's just go with top 40 and kind of see what that gives us. And you can see here that it's added an enveloper, which will help to add some punch to the low frequencies and that sort of thing. There's one compressor here. And look, if you look at these are already set. So obviously with any preset, you're going to have to go in and adjust things and kind of see what that does to your mix. There's an EQ with very, very simple, additions to things. There's an exciter, which actually is bypassed at this point. And then there's a multipressor, which actually it looks like they've added in some low end and that sort of thing. And then usually the last chain in any mastering, the last plugin rather in any mastering chain is always going to be a limiter, because you're literally pushing the volume into a limiter, and maximizing the overall volume. So let's just hear what that did to our record. So what I'll do is I'll go through and bypass each one of these, and then we'll turn them on and see kind of what they do. So the first thing I notice obviously is it's much quieter, but let's go ahead and bring these things back in one at a time.
We stayed up late inside your home, singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls, or while we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste.
So obviously it made it louder, a little bit punchier. Actually, it's not a bad mastering chain. It's a very, very, if I wanted something quick, maybe I'm going to show this track to somebody and I just wanted to make sure it was louder and it was, competitive. I might use something like this as a quick fix. Me personally, I like to kind of do things on my own and get to things to a place where I think they should be. Most mastering engineers will focus on a louder part of the record. So usually you'll just kind of cycle through the loudest part of the record and kind of go through it, and ultimately that's the section that you want to be where you want to be, and then you reference other sections of the record. So I've gone ahead and put a cycle in between what looks to be the loudest part of the record here. So we'll go through and we'll try another preset just to give you a sense of what some of them do. We'll go into the legacy, and it's a running joke to use broadcast ready. A lot of times people will be like, is it broadcast ready? And what they usually mean is, have you put some very cheesy plugin setting on the record as a joke. So we'll see what broadcast ready does to this. And then just initially right away you can hear that the low end is like completely off the chain. It's become very muddy, and that's in direct relation to them actually boosting subsonic frequencies that we don't even use. So not the best preset, but to give you an idea of just how different things can affect the master. Mastering is a very, very subtle art, and obviously this has changed the focus of the record completely. Let's play a little bit more of it. Yeah, so they've added bass in two areas. They've added it in the EQ, and then there's a multipressor here. A multipressor, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a frequency-based compression system. So it focuses on different frequencies, and if that frequency spectrum gets to a certain threshold, at that point there is a gain reduction that takes place. So it's a good way to tighten up things on a frequency level. And give you a better overall sense. Really powerful tool and really easy to misuse a multipressor. So that's enough presets for now. I think what we'll do is this. Let me get rid of this channel strip, reset channel strip. what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go through and show you really quickly, the plugins that we would use. I'm not going to use a gain plugin, which I would do in most mastering situations. But we'll see if we can get away without using a gain plugin and lowering the volume at all. So first thing is going to be a compressor, and the Logic compressor is actually a really nice compressor. It gives you a lot of different examples of compressors. So what we're going to do is we're going to go with something that's very, very gentle. And the most gentle, the most gentlest type of compression is always going to be something that's labeled as opto. Opto stands for optical compressor, and the way it works is it uses an LED and a light sensor to achieve the voltage. So what that means is there is a light that's attached to the voltage, and then obviously I'm talking about this from an analog standpoint because that's what it's referring to. There's a light that's attached to the voltage, and what happens is there is a light sensor that is reading how much light is coming through. So the higher the voltage, the more the amplitude, the more light you're going to get from the LED. Therefore, we set a threshold or a peak reduction in the case of an analog, like an LA2A or something like that, which then says, okay, once the light gets above this level, that's when compression will take place. So because of the inherent electronics that's present in an optical compressor, it's a very gentle form of compression. I guess the other side to that would be something like a FET, a studio FET or a vintage FET. FET uses a field effect transistor to determine how much the voltage is coming through. So it happens a little bit quicker. It's a little bit more aggressive. Sometimes you can hear pumping with a FET compressor, something of that sort. So again, we're just going to go ahead and start playing this, and we're going to make very, very subtle adjustments. Remember, mastering is all about subtlety. You want everything to be transparent. You don't want to hear anything working. You just want it to enhance the attributes of the mix itself. So you can see that we were peaking over here. So what this has done is obviously it's given us a little bit more volume, which we definitely want. We're going to end up pushing that volume into a limiter so that things get a little bit more flattened out, a little bit more compressed, a little bit more tighter, a little bit more polished sounding, and that's a direct result of what compressors can bring to a project. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm obviously just going to make some very, very light EQ adjustments, and the areas I want to focus on for this type of music are definitely going to be the low frequencies here, and want to make things very, very shiny, bright sounding, clearer, maybe even focus on the vocals a little bit. So I'm going to do some things to the EQ here to give us a better sense of what's happening within the music. I definitely want to move my cycle over here to an area with vocals so I can hear how that sounds with my EQ.
We stayed up late inside your home, singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls. Oh, how we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste away my nights. save me?
The other thing I like about the Logic EQ, which is actually a really nice EQ, it does several things that other EQs don't do. First of all, if you're using a filter, it allows you to do a resonant curve with your filter for you guys that are into production. That's huge. Not every DAW gives you that option. A resonant curve, if you don't know, gives you access to some very, very cool effects. The second thing is there's an analyzer, a frequency analyzer that you're able to bring up just to kind of see what's happening with the audio that's going through it. So here is the way to turn that on right here. Is the analyzer, and you can set it from pre to post. Pre meaning before EQ, and post meaning after the EQ there. So some useful tidbits there. So you can see we just added some very, very light things to kind of massage things in there, make things a little bit more punchy, make things a little bit clearer sounding. And I think that the subtle things that we added to this definitely made a little bit of a difference in a positive way. And I'm kind of feeling what we have here so far. So we're going to add another compressor. And this compressor is going to be essentially for the peaks. It's not going to be doing, any kind of serious kind of compression. I just wanted to control the peaks of the audio that's coming through. So we'll set this fairly aggressively and with a very high threshold. And on this one, I'm definitely going to use something more aggressive. So I'll try the vintage FET or the studio FET just to kind of see what they do, for us.
We stayed up late inside your home, singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls. Oh, while we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you, I could waste away my nights. And with you, I can finally feel alive. Oh, 'cause you are the one I adore. Save me.
So you can see that it's barely moving at all. There's a fairly aggressive ratio that's happening here. And then the threshold is set very, very high. And then we're adding just a teensy bit of volume to make up for kind of what we're doing here. And that's pretty typical with most compressors. You're going to set your ratio, set your threshold, and then you're going to make up the difference in the gain. And then you mess with the attack and release depending on how quickly you want things to respond. But just remember, you super fast attack, usually that's when you get things, bad artifacts. So you got to use that very, very carefully, especially in the mastering process. If your compressor is too aggressive and you have too hard of an attack, you're going to hear some kind of pumping. And that's definitely a negative artifact, especially this late. Now, you may like that. You may be trying to do a side chain or something to that effect, going for some type of effect. Again, there's no right or wrong way to approach things, but you obviously want to know the gear that you're working with, or the plugins rather that you're working with, and know how to achieve the best possible outcome with those plugins. So learning the plugins, I can't stress enough how important that is. Okay, what we're going to do in this case is I want to mess around with the stereo image. So we're going to use some sort of imaging. So I'll use like a direction mixer or stereo spreader. A lot of times I use it, not just in mastering, but in the production process. But I want to see what this does. And we may end up ditching it later and kind of see what it does, to this mix and kind of see what happens there. I can already tell you I hate it. It's changed things. So it just needs to be a lot more subtle.
We stay the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls. Oh, how we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste away my nights, and with you I can finally feel the.
So the cool thing about this plugin is that it has frequency-based spreading. So you're able to, spread the stereo image a little bit further and bring out some of the reverb, bring out some of the delay, those types of things, using this type of thing in a frequency-based basis. So it's actually a pretty cool plugin, and you'll find that a lot of the Logic-based plugins, I mean, they're really, really good. Logic's done an excellent job of, including really everything that you would need. Even their synth selection is really, really good. And this is actually one of the few I know that is frequency-based. So what this has done, I've gone ahead and just selected a plugin, a preset, to control some of the medium and high frequencies and get a little bit more of a spread, from those. And you can hear the effect. What it does is it brings out the reverbs, brings out, the effects that were added. But we want to keep things very, very subtle, and maybe even less so, because again, we don't want to make any major changes to the song itself. We just want to brighten and enhance is the goal here.
Singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls. Oh, how we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste away my nights, and with you I can finally feel alive. Oh, 'cause you save me.
Okay, so last chain, plug in this chain is going to be a limiter. And, the limiter that's most commonly used for mastering is something made by Waves called the L2. And this is a very, very close, relation to that. What it does is it sets an output level that says, okay, no music will go above this output level. And then you're able to push gain into that output level to get more of a higher RMS value. Remember that in mastering, we're not so much worried about the peaks. Obviously, you don't want to peak. But we're going to, in mastering, you're always going to have a limiter that says, okay, we're not going to let anything go above this volume level. And I've set that volume level to negative 0.1 dB. And the 0.1 is just merely so that we don't, because even some, DAWs will peak at 0. So this just says, okay, we're not going to peak at 0. And you can't, the human ear can definitely not, not even notice a 0.1 dB change. And then you'll see that we've pushed the gain into this and quite a bit. Now, this is overdone. I won't leave it this way, but I just want to show you the difference of what happens when you're using something like this. And even a very, very small change can make a significant difference. So let's see if you can hear the difference.
Singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls. Oh, how we dreamed of.
I want to do it even more just so you can get a sense of how damaging this particular plugin can be.
Singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls. Oh, how we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste away my nights,
difference is, and I'll give you another example, bypassing it and bringing it back in. But it's what it's doing is it's literally it's distorting the waveform. It's pushing the volume into this output level that says we're not going to go above this output level, and it's literally changing the shape of the waveforms, and it's trying to compensate by having release that's fairly quick, so that it's inaudible to the ear. But we've overdone it in this case, and it sounds harsh, it sounds abrasive. And the sad thing is that a lot of the music that you hear out there in the world is harsh and abrasive and really, really unfortunate. And this comes as a direct result. It comes down to a marketing thing. It's terrible. What happened in the 80s is that we were in something called the Loudness Wars. And what the Loudness Wars was people realized that albums or records rather would sell more if they were louder than the record that came after it or before it, rather, on the radio. So, if you go back to like 70s and records, that were mastered in the 70s, you'll have an average RMS value of about negative 17 dBFS, right? So that means the average volume of that record is fairly low. Nowadays, not that the number means anything, but the average RMS value of a song is usually around negative 6 dBFS. So we've jumped 12 dB in average volume in a period of about 40 years. And it comes down to that simple fact, the marketing aspect of music, wherein people think louder is better, and that's absolutely 100% not true. We know that louder isn't better. So the reason I point this out is to say, yes, you do want to compete auditorially with the records that are out there, but at the same time, you don't want to do so at the expense of the audio that you're working on. So I'm going to set this much, much lower, and we're going to, I guess I'll go back and bypass it so you guys can hear that. So it's atrocious to listen to. It's hurtful. And if you listen to something that that long, you'll notice that your ears get tired. It's really difficult to listen to.
We stayed up late inside your home, singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls, or while we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste away my nights, and with you I can finally feel alive. Oh, 'cause
So most of the volume that we're getting from this track is from other plugins, and that's what you're doing. You're essentially adding volume. So here we're adding a dB or 2 dB, 3 dB there. Channel EQ is adding some because we've added some amplitude in certain frequency ranges. And then in the other compressor, we've added another dB or so. So we're already adding volume. Things are going to be louder. And remember, this was a fairly loud mix to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bounce this out. We'll bring it back into our session just so we can get a look at the waveform differences and you can kind of see what it has. But for a very quick master, this would be a fairly easy plug-in chain to use, and the results are pretty clear. It's not terribly distorted. It's definitely louder, and things sound a little bit tighter and more in the pocket, so to speak. So let me bounce this out, and we'll give you a sense of what the final waveform looks like. Okay, so I've gone ahead and imported this new mastered file back into our session, so you can see the overall volume is much louder. Looks a lot more like something you would download off iTunes now. There is the classic brick. It's not too bricked out, but it's fairly bricked out, which is pretty common these days, unfortunately. And we'll go ahead and mute this original one, and then we'll take these plugins off just so you can hear what the ultimate final outcome is.
Stayed up late inside your home, singing to the songs we know. The rhythm intertwined our souls, all while we dreamed of something more. 'Cause with you I could waste away, and with you I can find the light. Oh, 'cause you are the one I adore, and we could have been so much more. Oh, but I took my time to figure it all out, and now you're loving me while I just dance in the background. Can you save me? Can you save me?
All right, that's it for now, guys. If you have more questions, don't be afraid to ask your mentor, or go in and schedule a tutoring appointment with the Recording Connection. Remember, the tutoring is free and it's part of your tuition, so take advantage of tutoring as much as possible. You can use this as a quick way to get a track ready to for showing people. Obviously, mastering is a really subtle and professional art. And it takes essentially a lifetime to master. So I hope this has been informative, and this is the last video in this series, so best of luck to you guys.